A little bit sad that the school holidays are over and some of us are back tomorrow. But you know, first world problems and all that, mate.
It's flown by these 6 weeks, isn't it?
Oh,
For you?
mate, it's absolutely within a shot that it's absolutely flown by. And that's the gutting thing is like you're there at the end of the holidays, at the end of the school term, and the holidays are there, and you got 6 weeks, and then bang, within like an eye shot, it's over just like that, mate. It's mad how quick it goes.
Do you feel recharged though?
Oh, absolutely, mate. Really recharged and looking forward to going again for another school year and what changes come into play. But always have to get through training day tomorrow, which is the first day. So, as we know, training day is a fun day.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what had happened there, but yeah.
That's right. No worries, mate. It's adjustable as always. No problems. But yeah, refreshed, ready to go. We'll see what changes come in for the new year, and we'll go from there, mate. So let's hope for a positive one.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep up the hard work. I'm sure you make a lot of difference to a lot of people, mate.
Well, I appreciate that, mate. And well, we'll see once the kids come back into school on Tuesday and hear about their summers. And hopefully, it's been a positive one, and we can have a pretty quiet week to start with, especially when you work in some of the most challenging parts of the school, shall we say. So it'll be interesting, mate. But as it comes on a Sunday, it's a refreshing time of the week, and or it's that downtime before after the week that we've had. At the moment, we're on the back of the holidays, so you might see a different me on a few different Sundays for weeks to come, mate. But in terms of a refreshing Sunday, it's been a bit of an upsetting Sunday for you, mate.
Mate. I've got no words after that. It's just happened again, isn't it?
Right when you text me, you said, "All right, I don't fancy this." In other terms, right? I thought, what, I don't know what you're stressing about, or I don't see there being much of an issue. I reckon Tottenham will win it, and then Newcastle have turned you over, mate, which is unfortunate for you.
Yeah, it's not a very happy ground to go to over the last few seasons, that's for sure. Today, I would say it was miles better today, undoubtedly. Just can't take our chances, and obviously now we've got Solanke out that was out today. We had Richarlison out, showed that we needed a centre forward in around for box today, and it just didn't materialise. And credit to Newcastle, they took their chances, and strikers, that's what quality strikers like Isaac do. They pounce on any opportunity that's given to them.
And I think you're absolutely right there. I think you're very unfortunate that Solanke's come straight in and he's gone straight out injured, literally after one game, and you're missing the essentially the star player that you've just signed in Solanke. Your big signing for summer, but it's down to players like Richarlison and Sonny to step up and really to take those spots and places. And again, I think that's where you're a bit reliant on having essentially one big striker in that squad rather than having two or three sort of capable strikers as you had over the years at different points, whether that be your Peter Crouch, your Jermaine Defoe, Roman Pavlichenko, Dimitar Berbatov, and then you got like your Rafael van der Vaarts within there. Then also you had your Aaron Lennons on the wing. So you had a very core attacking rotation, and then Bale, etc. as that moved on. But I think you're missing those extra players like a Jermaine Defoe in that squad alongside Solanke for you to really have that rotation. I think that's where you've sort of missed out on a player like Ivan Toney, essentially, and that's where you might struggle for the next couple of weeks.
No, I totally agree. I think this is it. Ange has got faith in that Johnson, Kulusevski, Sonny can all play through for middle. But I mean, yeah, Johnson did Forest, Kulusevski. I suppose it's nice to have that fluidity with him for squad.
Mm.
But it's not going to help us get to them. I suppose them next levels on what we're wanting to achieve. because we were always cutting short. It showed that opening game against Leicester where we were short again, that we wasn't taking our chances. Last week we was ruthless against Everton. Um, Probably the most ruthless game we've had under Ange, in all fairness. But it always seems to come when we play the likes of Newcastle away. We always just tend to crumble, and like I was talking to my granddad, I'm a Spurs fan, who was just saying, take City, take Arsenal, take Liverpool. They kill off games. We don't do that, and it's it's just very Spursy.
And that's what it always literally comes down to, is literally having the Spurs way. But I think, as you're sort of speaking there and mentioned Liverpool, I can see here in the corner of my eye, I think they're just about to go 1-0 up against the United game. So I've got flash score open there. It's literally got the dot and it's flashing. So that'll be interesting whether Liverpool get a result today. And they've literally just gone 1-0 up there in that game. So if they do get that result, they've had a very positive start, because I think they're the only team to still not have conceded a goal in the Premier League. And I'm not sure, I can't remember whether that's still for the other leagues on that statistic, but Trent Alexander-Arnold opening up on 7 minutes. I watched parts of their last game, Liverpool, and I was so impressed with Trent. And I literally want to do like a highlight on him and just look at the game that he's had. I know he was frustrated coming off, but for me, from what I'm seeing from him, I think he's going to have a very strong season as an English player for us to look at in terms of your, as you say with that word, ilk of English players that we've got across our clubs, right? So whether that's a Solanke, whether that is, Sterling now going to Arsenal, whether that is looking at what Trent Alexander and how they all perform, I think it's definitely going to be very interesting. But, when we look at Spurs, just to recap on them a little bit, if we look at just towards the end of pre-season, they lost to Bayern Munich twice. They've come in, they conceded against Leicester and drew 1-1. I think Leicester will have a bit of a shaky season. They went on and beat Everton 4-0. Everton losing 3-2 yesterday after being 2-0 up. And now they've lost to Newcastle. So opening games, they've had 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss in the Premier League. It's okay at the moment because that it's a very even scoreboard in that position. But when you look at it, you've got 4 points from 9. When you've got squads like Liverpool, who are playing very well at the moment, you've got your City playing very well. Arsenal dropped points yesterday, but they're against a very good Brighton squad at the moment. I think this could be a tough season ahead for Spurs, and it'll be interesting to see where they finish. But if I have to ask you where you think they're going to finish by the end of the year, where do you think they're going to finish?
I don't think it's going to be top six. I think this international break's another debate at some point. It's come sort of for on time for Spurs. I mean, the first game that we've got straight after coming back from it is the North London derby. I mean, in a sense, you could say it's a great chance for us to put it right. After today's performance, but really, you need that sort of game to come up literally next week, not in 2 weeks' time after the international break.
And it is quite surprising how quick these big rivalry games kick in. Like Liverpool and United were already 3 matches in, and we got one of them up and presenting. We got the North London derby up and coming. We had the Scottish derby with Celtic and Rangers already. And it's quite interesting how quick they are earlier on in the season. But then it's also good for that sort of space in between to look at how those teams perform in the other half of the season. So when you have that North London derby and you come back from a transfer international window, it'll be interesting to see how you've performed in between that period, but then whether you get another result depending on what that North London derby is initially in game 1, how it looks in game 2. So I think it's definitely going to be an interesting season for all the teams. But I think Spurs, for you, I think you've had a very positive season under Ange last year. He talks about winning a trophy in his second year. How they're going to perform, because it is looking like a very competitive league ahead of us again this year.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is it. I've seen on social media today after the game that a lot of Spurs fans are worried. I'm bordering sitting in the middle of that. I see the concern, but then I look positively with it because I feel that this season 3 games in, I can see that we've definitely improved in some things, in some areas of our game, from last season. I know it's early days, but we seem to be coping with set pieces a lot better this season in defending them. That was one thing that I felt was going to be our Achilles heel again today against Newcastle, with for like Stan Burn in the box, but we cope with it pretty well. It's just I don't know. It's just that conviction, it's that belief that we've got to get over the line, and I don't know what it is. Is it a mentality thing? Is it, you could say, is it a, yeah, just belief maybe, I don't know, but I do trust in Ange. Some supporters are saying I'm really starting to question Ange now. Um, I'm not. I was a bit surprised that he took 80 odd minutes for him to take Yves Bissouma off today. On a yellow card, which was a bit of a risk because he made a few fouls in that second half, which could have been risky business. But I can't be one to really judge Ange after at half time we brought Brennan Johnson on, which I thought was a bit gun ho, especially away at Newcastle, and to leave Basuma as the only holding midfielder in there.
Mm.
Um, it just didn't pay off. But top 6, that's what I feel, Luca. I feel that that's where we'll finish. But it's just very, very frustrating as a Spurs fan to see that today really was an opportunity we could have actually got 3 points off the board because we earned it.
But again, it's that thing where you've only had Postecoglou for a year now, and it'll be dependent on the year that you have. And I think the signings at the end of it. But I think it'd be frustrating, even as a neutral fan, for you to go and sack Postecoglou after 2 years rather than give him a 3-year window. And again, it could be that argument that you haven't brought in trophies, but would you be sacking Postecoglou too quickly, for example?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is it. Is Levy's again? I think Levy's in danger territory because it could go backwards again, or on the other hand, it could go forward with what Ange's tried to set up. But I look at it now, and I think we've got a young, hungry squad, a lot of potential in there, a lot of players that are going to go to the next level. I've been impressed with Wilson Odobert so far in his start at Tottenham, um, and I do think Ange's the right man for it. However, realistically, if just say Ange, it wouldn't. I really don't think it would because it would be bizarre. But football does surprise you. If Ange was to say, "I've had enough after today's game," who would come in? I can't think of anybody else that would be out there in the market that's suitable for Spurs at the moment. You could say bring Poch back, but is that the answer? No.
I think that's what you'd have to look at is sort of bringing in Pochettino to come back, because I think it's very difficult for you to nail down a particular type of manager unless you keep Postecoglou. You've gone through world-class managers like Mourinho and Conte. You've gone for Postecoglou, who's had success across abroad and coming into very well with Celtic. You've had Pochettino, who's come up from the Premier League in terms of Southampton and his previous work with Espanyol. But who would you go for then? You've had the world-class managers, you've had your not-so world-class managers.
Mhm. No, exactly. It leaves it open-ended on that front. I think what Spurs has always stood out to me is that, yeah, big names don't suit the club. I mean, the motto of the club is to dare is to do. Um, we've tried to dare to do with the managers, failed. And it's pretty much now, even with Ange, his to dare is to do in a completely different context of vibrant football that's I might change my mind to come tomorrow because we can be like that as supporters, but sometimes it can be reckless.
And I think so, mate, when it comes to those sort of situations, and I think we're in the sort of same boat as Chelsea fans at the moment because we lost in Europe earlier this week. We've just drawn them with Crystal Palace this afternoon. A good point for Crystal Palace because they haven't started off positively. But for us as Chelsea fans, I think, again, Maresca's in charge, but I think he has to be given at least 2 years because the amount of players that we've had in our turnover and the type of squad that he has, he needs to stamp his authority on that squad. He needs to stamp his style of play. There's so many players to rotate in there. At least that the board must understand he really needs that time to look at who he can rotate, whether he needs to loan players out at the end of the year, whether players will fit that plan, whether it's now or in the long term, and just have some actual management over the squad. Because again, we brought in a young player last year. We've already shipped him out to Strasbourg. We've got co-ownership, I believe, of that club. So it's good that he's still within the ownership model somewhere. But it just shows that, right, we bought him as Chelsea, we shipped him out straight away. We want to try and keep that talent, but we can't do it here at Chelsea because we have too many players, because we're still trying to stack it. So when you look at that individual player, he's being impacted on his own development because we've had to move him out. But he might excel at Strasbourg and good for an individual point of view, but we got too many players again, and it's going to be interesting, especially when that comes into it. Now, I know we spoke about this the other week, but were you surprised by Jadon Sancho coming into Chelsea?
Yes, I was. I literally thought it was a wacky transfer rumor, but then I thought after the window that Chelsea's had, in some ways, it sort of did. It shocked me, but it didn't surprise me as well at the same time. And it was a really weird transfer. I mean, I was looking at a Chelsea team today, and I mean, yeah, he got a goal, Jackson, but to have him start over How Felix, I mean, I don't know what that's about personally. You might tell me differently there, Luca. But Sancho, yeah, I mean, if he gets game time, good luck to him because he's not getting it at United. But what do you think on it? Because it's just been a bizarre window for Chelsea, hasn't it?
Really bizarre, mate. I really like Jadon Sancho. I want him to uplift his career. I want him to have some good years. I just don't want him to turn into Hudson-Odoi V.2 or a Jesse Lingard, I don't want his career to completely drop off, or like a Dele Alli. I want him to have that consistency because he did start well at Dortmund. And, if it doesn't work out at Chelsea, he might become Sterling V2, for example, whereby he ends up at Spurs, and that's the type of club that he ends up. Or maybe a Villa might suit him under a Unai Emery, and the type of players like Jacob Ramsey, Ollie Watkins. He does sort of fit that sort of style. But whether he wants to, review whether he wants to play for an Aston Villa after a Chelsea, a Dortmund, a United, is again whether that's ego driven, and that'll be whether he goes out then to Saudi Arabia and there's an Ivan Toney. So it depends on the type of personality and character which he has. It depends whether he's going to nail down and lock himself in, but I want very positive things for him. And when you touched upon that starting squad there, he didn't make the squad today, which is completely understandable. Signed a couple of days ago. When you have the look at the attack that we had Nato, Cole Palmer, Maduke, Jackson, all starting. Fernandez and Casado behind them. And then we brought on João Felix, Mudryk, and then Nukugun and Kuku. All right. So we got 3 players off the bench who are quality. And then you look at the rest of the bench. So you've got Casady, Dewsbury Hall, Diassi, who didn't even come off the bench today. How difficult is it going to be for Jadon Sancho to try and get into that starting 11?
It's going to be very difficult, isn't it? And I think there's competition for places, and then there's competition for places. I know that sounds an understatement, but it's like Maresca. I mean, again, you could say the international break for maybe Maresca's a bit of a blessing because it gives him time to evaluate where things are at with Chelsea, with the squad, and so on and so forth. But most of them players are going to go out on international duty anyway. So it again, that's not really come at an ideal time for Maresca. And you're right, he does need time to evaluate that squad. It can't be a knee-jerk decision, where Todd Bowley thinks enough is enough because it's not working out. You know, teams need time to gel. It's not an overnight thing. Rome wasn't built in a day.
And I completely agree with you. And I think it is that time thing about looking at how the squad and how that sort of plays in. And we've already offloaded some players like Sterling, who we'll chat about in a moment. We've offloaded Lukaku. And there's been over 100 million of sales that we brought in this window. Kepa has gone out to Bournemouth. Didn't have a great start to his debut yesterday, being 2-0 down to Everton. And I was unfortunate to sort of see for a goalkeeper like him. But they came back and won 3-2. So a big result for Bournemouth. And again, we'll chat about Everton a little bit later on the back of last week's conversation. But there's 2 former Chelsea players that I just want to touch upon and have a discussion with. So Sterling, who we just mentioned a moment ago. So he obviously went out to Arsenal. Good move for him. Liverpool, Chelsea, Liverpool City, Chelsea, Arsenal. It's not a bad career, as we said in last week's episode. But an opportunity to try and push himself back into the England squad. How do you think he'll perform in in an Arsenal squad under Arteta?
I think he'll flourish if he gets. Yeah, I know it's again an understatement, but if he gets time and gets game, I think he will really flourish in that squad. It fits in for the Arteta mould quite well because he can play out wide or false nine, which suits their style. We were saying about Arsenal needing another sort of striker to compete. Sterling's proved that in the Premier League that he can compete at a very good level. He helped City on their way to their titles. Um, I'm just, I suppose I'm a bit frustrated that Spurs didn't take a punt and say, you know what, that's where we could have gone in and has gone in for a loan. Because didn't I hear us? You might tell me if I'm wrong here, but I swear I heard that Arsenal have said they're meeting for middle wages even with Chelsea on that.
Yes, we did, mate, and yeah, well, they did, and I think Spurs have missed out on a quality player like Sterling there, just to, try and challenge Brendan Johnson a little bit more to try and add that quality into the squad. You've got a Premier League winner in Sterling there, an England international who's trying to break back into the squad. I think the Spurs could suit him, but it'll be interesting to see what he does at Arsenal. I know you're a Spurs fan, I'm a Chelsea fan, but we both support England, and it'll be interesting to see whether he tries and gets back into that squad, because the quality in that squad and the selections that we've had for this window already are looking pretty tasty. But we'll get on to that a little bit later, Joe. But I think it's going to be an interesting season for Sterling at Arsenal and how he performs. And if he has an excellent season, then I want to say fair play to him, because I do like Sterling. I'm gutted we sold him. But he could put his two fingers up the Maresca and say, you sold me. Look at what I'm going to do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think Arteta's going to be good to rediscover his confidence. I think he worked with Arteta at City anyway, didn't he? So
Yes,
it
he
could
did.
be a sort of a pretty match made there in that respect. And I reckon that could help Arsenal get over the line a bit more again when people, myself included in last week's episode, was questioning where the option was for another forward for Arsenal to get them over the line.
And I'm glad that he's gone out on loan, because he could have been well within his rights to stay at Chelsea, earned his paycheck, and then looked at January in terms of what he wanted to do. But Nation League games are coming up. We've got some friendlies. He wants to try and get back in that England squad, and to have 3 months of just training and be isolated from the squad. Now he's in the first team picture. Now he's out on loan, and at Chelsea are in a position whether if it doesn't work out, and same for Arsenal, then Chelsea reassess their options at the end of the year. Arsenal go with them, work out, and back he goes. So I think Arsenal hold the cards in that sort of situation there. But it'll be interesting to see whether he has a good season. Then Chelsea tried to, literally bend Arsenal over and try and get as much out of them at the end of the year. So I think that there's a lot more to that transfer yet to see in his season. But Chelsea seem to have dominated this window, mate, in terms of ex-players, players who were supposed to have been coming in, players who have come in like Sancho, who were very unexpected, players who have, left the club. But here's a player that we missed out on. I was truly gutted to lose out on this player. I'm gutted he's joined Liverpool, unfortunately. But what a signing he is for Liverpool, and only £13 million. What a player and what a signing by Liverpool.
Brilliant signing. Yeah, what a bargain. Absolutely. That's going to help Liverpool again be on fringes, I think, with his expertise. Can see why he was gutted up. I mean, he was linked with Spurs, I think, earlier on in for window as well. Another player that I would have happily taken at Spurs. It's just, I don't know what it is. I know it's going back to Spurs in the context, but we were saying about Sterling a second ago, and you think, right, proven, but also might have a little bit of an ego. But Spurs don't really have that in a player. You look at a Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, City. There's someone in there that's got a bit of an ego that sort of rubs off on the team that gets them over that next level. Spurs don't have that. It's just like I think I think it must have been Mourinho that said it when he was at Spurs. Everyone's too nice. Everyone's pally with each other at Spurs and friendly, but there's no one that's there to just drive it. And Jose, I think, would have been a great fit for Spurs. But Liverpool, yeah, great signing, and it's certainly going to help take the weight off shoulders of other players there in the squad. That's for sure.
And I think again it is such a great signing, especially for 13 million. And I think Spurs have missed out on another player there. So they've missed out on maybe Tony, they've missed out on Sterling, they've missed out on Chiesa. And I think, that's the kind of business which they need to be securing. But when you look at Tony, he ended up going for 40 million, and then you've got Chiesa coming in for 13. That budget sort of seems more like the round mark which Spurs usually tend to go for. And I think to have a player like him coming from Juventus, he's sort of like your Galactical player, although he's not like your Ronaldo, your Mbappe, your Vinicius Juniors, etc. I think he is kind of like a Galactico because of the success that he's had, the quality that he plays for Juve, the everything that he offers at the moment. I think that ballpark figure would have been like a Rafael van der Vaart, and he would have been a good investment. And if he had performed well for a couple of years and Spurs wanted to cash in for him like they do on Good Business, I think he would have actually had a good return on that. But I think that's an excellent move from Liverpool.
Totally agree. One of the smartest business uh, transfers in this whole summer, I think.
I think so, mate, and I think it'll be interesting to see what he does for Liverpool. He's not in the Liverpool squad today, not on the bench again, but again, he's just been signed in the window, so obviously that blend to come back into the squad, and just it's. I think I just hope he doesn't become too clinical for them, where he costs us in games like Chelsea, etc., and he becomes that player that we missed out on, and we should have signed. But just touching upon that sort of Italian theme, players and how they're doing. So Napoli were 1-0 down last night with Conte. A bit of a struggling start for them at the moment, but they brought big Romelu Lukaku off the bench later on in the game, and they went on to win 2-1 with Lukaku scoring one of the goals. And I think that's good for a player like Lukaku. I think he's accumulated like over 400 million in transfers in his career. When you look at the type of clubs you've had, Anderlecht, he's had Chelsea, he's had West Brom, Everton, United, returned to Chelsea, he's been out to Inter Milan, he's been out to AS Roma, now he's at Napoli. He's had a pretty solid career himself as well, and I'm
Yeah,
glad that he is scoring. I think he's another great player who's been perhaps underwhelming at times for us as Chelsea. But again, we spent so much money on Sterling and Lukaku, and yet they haven't performed for us because of these changes in the squad. How quickly we've had a succession of managers, and now they've been shipped out and might have success elsewhere.
yeah, absolutely. I think Romelu Lukaku, unfortunately, when he came back to Chelsea, there was a huge price tag labelled in his head, wasn't there?
Mm.
Which can incite more pressure on the player. I mean, you hear players talking in interviews, it doesn't phase them somewhat, but I bet it does. Because if you haven't got goals under your name or whatever, it's more pressure and the crowd get on your back straight away. And that's your duty particularly as a top flight striker, is you're based on scoring goals. Lukaku, I'm glad that it's working out for him, that it's going to work out for him at Napoli. Him and Conte have got a proper solid bromance, haven't they?
I love it, mate. He is like your Nico Kranjčar and Harry Redknapp. He is literally your Mourinho Matic, your Mourinho SCN sort of relationship. So I love to see those little relationships form. But when you sort of have that, right, and you've got Victor Omishman, who didn't move out to Chelsea, he didn't move out to Al Ali out in Saudi Arabia. Now he's been banished from the squad and he's not playing himself. I think there will be a lot of suitors come January and he'll be off anyway. But he's now got 3 months, not even registered in that Napoli squad, which means he is literally just getting paid to train. I think it's ridiculous that they haven't even registered him, and he could just sit on the bench most games anyway. And then if he causes you a problem, then just don't select him for match day. But I think when you're paying that player as much money as you are, to not select him in that squad, I think the board have to be giving Conte a lot of backing within that. And I think it is difficult when Omishman has been such a great player. He's been linked with Chelsea, Al Ahly, and yet he's not even been registered for the Napoli squad. I think that sort of baffles me, but I do understand the context within a lot of that.
It's absolute madness, though, isn't it, that a player of his quality doesn't get registered, and he could suit and do a job for so many teams. Um, it's, I suppose it's good. It's showing that there's, as you say, showing Conte with a bit of belief and backing, because as we heard or you were saying in the podcast the other week, that there was someone that grasped a player, I can't remember that's name, but grasped their manager up, whatever it was, wasn't it? And tried to get them sacked.
Oh yes, 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 and when it comes down to that sort of situation, it was that player power. Oh, mate, I'm trying to recall who that was now off the top of my head. Oh my gosh, literally, who was that? He literally tried to claim player power over the squad, and he wanted him sat. Oh, it was Thibaut Courtois with Belgium, and
That's it. Yes.
yeah, the manager Tedesco. Yes. So wanted that control over the squad. So again, a little bit of a Belgian theme, but here we are with Napoli. Right, they've signed Scott McTominay from United. What's your thoughts on that?
Great signing for Napoli, but why on earth have United let him go?
I think he's not a world class player, but he is such a great squad player. He's a young player who's come through the system. He knows United. He didn't really want to leave because he was being linked with Fulham. I think to end up at Napoli after turning down Fulham isn't a bad sort of move for him in his career as well. But good opportunity to go abroad. But again, I think United have sold a key player there, or maybe not a key player, but a key squad player, and yet it might come it might backfire on them, and he might end up back in the Premier League with an Arsenal, for example, or maybe with a Chelsea, because they might go, do you know what, we need someone who's homegrown. We have been impressed with how he's been performing abroad. He's an international player. Could we go for someone who knows the Premier League like him?
I mean, look how many crucial goals he got over the last couple of years for Ten Hag. I mean, if it wasn't for McTominay's crucial goals, Ten Hag might have been way gone by now. He
Mm.
was quite a big impact player off the bench, because he put him in like a sort of forward role, didn't he? Originally, I believe he was renowned for his defensive midfield works before all this goal scoring form came in. But he needs games because with Scotland, with their international football, obviously after that disappointing Euros, they need their key players to keep on playing, and that could be a good fit for Napoli. And again, with Conte, him working with Conte, it might give him some more experience about his all-round game. And Serie A is a great league to go to. Very competitive. Uh, it's a different style of football over there, as we know, but that could be a blessing for McTominay for his development, for his own career.
And I think they've made some moves there, Napoli. I think from a business sense, right, when they brought in Romelu Lukaku, Scott McTominay, and they might end up offloading Omishman and the money that they make off him. I think they could actually turn that into a positive position, but they need to start, picking up results because, Inter Milan are a very good team. Juventus with Thiago Motta have played some good football, and they're starting off very positively as well. And I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's Juventus versus Como later on, or Juventus and Como played last week. Juventus beat Como 2-0. Obviously, Como managed by Cesc Fabregas, and I know Como are playing Udinese later tonight. So that'll be an interesting fixture just from an ex-player point of view, which I know has been a theme over our last few episodes. But when it comes to
Definitely
this,
like a simulation, isn't
oh,
it?
mate, 100% like a simulation. And I'm sort of very interested in terms of how Fabregas gets on as manager. Obviously, he couldn't manage last year because he didn't have his right license, but now he's stepped up to be a manager in the Serie A. It's a very tough league. So I'm very interested to see how Como get along. But when it comes to the sort of foot manager simulations, right, again, this is like an equivalence of a Lukaku in a way because Tammy Abraham's a very good striker, right? I'm a big fan of him. I was gutted when we sold him, but he's gone from Chelsea to Roma, good move. Now he's gone from Roma on loan to literal rivals AC Milan, right? And they've done like a sort of a swap deal where they've loaned one for one, right? But this is a great move for AC Milan. Another player who doesn't get into the England squad was previously at one point, but again, this is the list of players who could be breaking into that squad. But he is one that I'm very interested in, and I hope he does have a good career. But very interesting for him to move to AC Milan. And on the back of that thought there, mate, who could come into a Spurs, could be a good signing for you, is Tammy Abraham.
Totally agree. Missed the boat again. um, Daniel Levy, we've got to have words after this podcast, mate. Um, it's, I don't know. It's a. This is it. I think all these players are, you know, they don't seem to be stable at one club now. They're on for move pretty much again if they can't seem to get games. Which again, I'm not disputing if they need game time. But Tammy Abraham, he's showing what he can do in top flight, and AC Milan. It might push AC Milan up a bit higher again, but I do find that a bit bizarre that Roma have let him out on loan.
I found that a very strange decision as well, especially to rivals like AC Milan.
Hmm,
But
exactly.
yeah, it's a very odd move, and I can't really understand the dynamics of it. But it's one where, for Tammy's point of view, I'm happy that he is playing and that he is having a good career, and I hope he does get some game time, and he does well for AC Milan this year.
Absolutely, totally agree. I think if it was anywhere else in Europe, you could say, okay, fair enough, makes sense. But yeah, just same league and everything like that. It makes you wonder what sort of is going through owners' heads at the moment and agents' heads and everything like that. Because yeah, it's just mesmerising. Football never ceases to fail to amaze me, really, because there's something every week that just shocks me.
And I think that's where it comes down to, right, is that shock and the way that football is very dynamic and very different, especially with the transfers that are made and, where players end up in their career and what is ahead of them. But he does have a younger brother, Tammy, called Timmy. So you got
Mm,
Tammy and Timmy Abraham, right? Timmy was on loan at Newport County years ago. I did see him play in a preseason friendly, and I was very impressed by him. And I did sign him on Foot Manager once, and he was just an absolute goal scoring beast in his career, right? But when you look at Timmy Wright, he started his career off at Fulham. He went out on loan to Bristol Rovers, Plymouth Argyle, Raith Rovers, and then Newport County. He then moved to Warsaw before going out on loan to Oldham Athletic. He then moved to Boreham Wood, Maidstone United, and now he has dropped the Tonbridge Angels, right, which is a lower league club in Kent, in the
mm.
National League South, so the sixth tier of football. He's only 23 years of age. He's a forward himself. And when you look at his career, right, he's played 68 professional games in total, and he scored a total of 8 goals. Now, from a data perspective, right, as a centre forward or someone who classes themselves as a forward, right, 8 goals in 68 isn't a real good turnaround. And when I look at it, right, a county score 3 in 17, Warsaw 1 in 12, 2 in 18 for Oldham, and that's been pretty much his goal scoring record for the last few years. So it is a bit of a shame when you are the younger brother, you are trying to make something of your career, but when you're looking at your older brother in a way, and it is good because you do have your older brother as your role model, but you are going to be a little bit gutted deep down because when you got someone like Tammy who's played for his national youth levels, he played for the senior team, he's been at Chelsea and played Premier League, he's gone
Mm.
out to Roma, now he's signed for AC Milan, and you've dropped down to National League South in Kent. It's a bit of an unfortunate, very different dynamic of the brother relationship where one goes off completely different and one is sort of excelling in his career.
That is mental, and the amount of clubs that you said to me, and he's only 23, it's like, really? It yeah, it must be, a very interesting conversation for Abram household, that's for sure.
And I always think
Um,
about those relationships, mate, in that household when, it might be like a family gathering or they get back together in summer, etc. And you've got to stand there chatting to your parents or whatever, or your family members, and you're playing for like, a team like Tonbridge, and no disrespect to them, but then you've got your
yeah,
brother sitting there playing for AC Milan. The levels are very, very different in that sort of conversation.
absolutely. You'd be like, "So, Timmy, how's it going at Tonbridge Angels?" "Yeah, it's alright." "And you at AC Milan, Tammy?" "Oh, absolutely phenomenal. Get to play at San Siro every fortnight." Like, it's crazy, isn't it? It really is.
It's unbelievable, mate, and the different experiences that they're going to have in their football careers is very interesting. But again, that's another ex-Chelsea player there, sort of having a career there. So we talked about Sterling, now he's at Arsenal. We talked about Jadon Sancho coming into Chelsea. We talked about missing out on Chiesa. So we talked about Romelu Lukaku. We've talked about Tammy Abraham and all these sort of ex-players who have related to Chelsea and their different movements in their career, and the madness that surrounds them. But someone who's gone back to his home ground is Aaron Ramsdale. And again, we've talked about him in previous weeks, but I'm actually really pleased to to see him go back and to be a number one goalkeeper. And again, another player potentially missing out on the England squad and didn't make this selection with Lee Carsley for the upcoming games. But he's gone back to Southampton. Now it's up to him to try and fight his way back into the England squad. I think Lee Carsley's right to drop him because he hasn't been playing, and now it's down to him to prove himself. Now he is number one at Southampton. But I think it's definitely going to be great to see him get some game time. But I think it's good that he's gone back to home in a way where he is renowned, where he is known, where he did start off before he moved on to Arsenal.
Yeah, I think it's a smart move for Ramsdale's career. He needs games. Um, I would have said Ramsdale was England number one a few years back, even though Pickford was chosen. I think with Ramsdale's form, it would have been my choice personally. However, it didn't. I think it's just he's got to a point in his career where he was in form of his life, but he got drops. And again, from a morale perspective, I can imagine that must be heartbreaking, really, when he was quite vital in a big reach of vein of form that Arsenal was under. He could have, I still feel that he could make most of them, most teams in for Premiership in their starting lineup, undoubtedly. But it is going to be an interesting time for an England setup. Personally, what Lee Carsley does, because Pickford's not had the best start of the season. Pope today was a bit shaky at times in for Newcastle. It's going to be a transition who's going to get the number one spot in the end, but you've got three keepers there: Pope, Ramsdale, and just said the name, Pickford, that you can choose from, and that in the long run that's good. But Ramsdale still for me stands out as number one.
I think that's very interesting from you there, mate. And I'm just looking into that as you're talking there, because Nick Pope obviously played for Newcastle today in a winning Newcastle side, but you said he was a little bit shaky, but they went on to win. You had Aaron Ramsdale, who made his debut yesterday, lost 3-1. Sam Johnston played for Wolves. I know he's not in the squad, but they drew 1-1. You had Jordan Pickford, who was in a loss yesterday and was heavily impacted by that turnaround from the Bournemouth side which they played. But when you look at that sort of team, right, Dean Henderson played for Crystal Palace. They drew 1-1 with Chelsea. When you look at the three goalkeepers in that squad now, Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope, and Dean Henderson, the Jordan Pickford's not in great form, but he is current England number one. You've got Dean Henderson, who's doing okay at Crystal Palace. You've got Nick Pope, who's doing okay. You then got Aaron Ramsdale, who's not started off great, but needs that game time to get back up to it. And then you've got sort of Sam Johnston on the fringes with Wolves. Again, none of these keepers have kept any clean sheets, and it's very tough for us. So I think that's the only thing we're missing is a world-class goalkeeper at the moment for our squad. And I think if you had to pick out of those three players in the squad right now, I'd go for Dean Henderson. But then if Jordan Pickford doesn't perform, he could very much lose out if Ramsdale picks his form back up and bang, Ramsdale's back in and number one for England again within a shot. But I think right now it's in Dean Henderson's hands to make himself number one.
Yeah, and I've always rated Dean Henderson. In all fairness, he's I think he's just trying to think. Pickford, as it's shown in that Euros final, it was his naivety. I think it wasn't. There was more times that he tried to play direct in that final against Spain than playing short, as far as I can remember. Anyway, all for modern goalkeepers these days play with their feet, and I think that again, as you say, that's what England sort of lack. We don't have that sort of Henderson maybe a bit more can, but it's just I don't know. It's a very difficult one for Lee Carsley to choose. But Pickford, you could say he's had some good tournaments, but on the other hand, you could say if he still gets number one place after the start that Everton's had this season, then why is he still being chosen? That'd be a question that I'd like to ask Lee Carsley.
And I think Lee Carsley has picked him ahead, obviously, of yesterday's game for that squad confirmation. But you have to, in a way, pick the number one goalkeeper who was playing, who played well in the Euros. And I think you do have to consider the team that he is playing with at Everton. But I think if his form drops off entirely, and you've got other goalkeepers who could potentially come into England in that squad at the moment, i.e. Ramsdale, then I think it could be a very brave move from Lee Carsley to drop Pickford, and he might actually gain some recognition because he's gained a lot of recognition in this England squad that he has selected at the moment, Lee Carsley. And then if he continues to make positive choices, which the fans are behind, it might sway the decision for them to go, you know what, he is actually the manager we need. So I think the next games over the next few weeks are going to be interesting for us. And I think we'll definitely discuss them on the podcast for sure. And it'd be interesting to see those lineups to discuss, the reflection from this conversation today that we have in terms of a conversation over the next few weeks. So I think it's definitely interesting times for England. That number one spot, who is going to claim it, and what position we're going to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an interesting time with Lee Carsley. I caught snippets of his press conference, and it did give me a bit of confidence. He did speak some good stuff in his press conference, actually. Um, I still laugh to this day, though, that now from that press conference when the journalist was saying to him, "So your parents are from like Cork or whatever. Have you ever been to Cork?" Well, I should hope so. Like, you know what I mean? Um, but on a serious note, I do think that it's going to be an interesting time for the cars. And Angel Gomez, one of them that he's chosen, is going to be, if he leads him in, it'd be good to see how he gets on. I just found it surprising and felt a bit sorry for Adam Wharton on the other hand that he got called up for the Euros, didn't get a minute, and he's not been called up even now.
I think it's definitely interesting. I think it's good that players like Angel Gomez has been called up, because I know there's been a lot of mixed reaction towards him being selected in that squad. But when you look at the stats that he's had and how he's been performing, I think he cements that place in the England squad. I think if we can cap players for Nation League games and we go right, they're committed to England, and we got that rotation, and we're bringing in younger players to start rotating in. I'm all for that, and I'm completely behind us bringing in younger players and giving them caps and having rotation.
Mm.
And we might see the likes of Adam Wharton breaking into the squad over the next few weeks. So I am gutted he didn't get into this one. But when you look at, again, that quality of who's been selected, and even us bringing in young players, and then players like your Sterlings, your Tammy Abrahams, who aren't even making the squad, I think that just shows the depths which we got across the midfield. So right now, if you're listening, it is a time not to be an England attacking player, but a time to be an England goalkeeper, because you might be in a position about being selected in the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. I would like us to have that model, as you say, with bringing for younger players through. I mean, it's shown how well it works out with Spain. So
Absolutely.
we need to sort of copy into that sort of frame, I think.
And when it comes to that international selection, and talking about what you said there about Lee Carsley and the question about York and where his parents are from and that heritage, a player who's been called up for the Welsh squad has been Carl Darlow. Carl Darlow is, I believe, a number two goalkeeper at the moment. He turned down a call many years ago from Ryan Giggs to represent Wales, because he wanted to keep the options open for England. Now, a lot of the fan reaction has been like, why do we have to have an English goalkeeper in? Why do we select a goalkeeper who's not number one? Why are we calling in a goalkeeper who's turned us down many years ago? Well, actually, if your options are very short at the moment, he's a good goalkeeper, and he himself has realised, I'm never going to get in the England squad. And then the Wales manager has come calling, not the other way around, to him calling up saying, I will now represent you. At the end of the day, he's been given that opportunity, and he's going to go, I got the chance to get caps. I've got a chance of international football. I might take this because, I'm never going to get one with England. I would have got one by now. And when you look at sort of the ilk of those goalkeepers who are available, he is never breaking into the England squad. So I think
No.
it'd be ridiculous to turn down an international call, regardless of what the fans say. And if he goes on and does quite well for Wales, then the fans can all, eat their own hats.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good opportunity for Carl Darlow to do so. I bet Wales, in a sense, hope that they had the riches of what England have in that respect for the choice for goalkeepers. side of things, don't they, Luca?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, mate. Very sparse on our selection because we got a wide array of championship lower league players that we are looking towards and calling up, and our squad pool isn't as good as England's. It doesn't have as much depth, and therefore you have to start looking and going, right, this player can represent us. Can I have a conversation about him representing us, say, over another nation? And that's the kind of conversations Wales are having because they're very limited on the players that are available who are top quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where football's transitioning so quickly as well, again, isn't it? You know?
Absolutely, mate. Well, a player who now turned down or didn't get selected for England and was selected now for Ivory Coast. This man here, who you were once linked with at Spurs, signed for Lyon in France. So I know he was linked with a move back to Crystal Palace this summer, but for him to go back out to France, what do you think of Zaha? A fan of him in any way? Dislike for him? What's your feelings? What's your thoughts?
Got a bit of an attitude. um, but he could play. It didn't really work out for him at United, did it?
No.
I think I would have liked to have seen him have more of a chance at United because I think he would have been their sort of player. He's shown it at Palace what he was capable of. I mean, if he would have gone back to Palace, it's like a players version, but when Martin Allen used to keep going back to Bar on it, you know? Um, it was Martin Allen, wasn't it? But yeah, it's a good move for him. Leon, I'm just trying to think. Are they in Europe this season? No, name's just gone.
Uh, not sure if they're like in a conference league or something. They're not really a squad that I've got too much eyes on, to be honest. But it's not a bad move considering he's gone for Crystal Palace out the Turkey, which a lot of people said, you know what, that's a nail in the coffin. Now he's sort of come back to a club who could be challenged for Europe, perhaps in Europe. I have to check that one. But I think coming back to Lyon and playing is pretty good move for him in his career, as you've just said there. So pretty positive for him in terms of him not just flaking off or just having a bit of a bad end to his career, but it's up to him to step up the play for Lyon now and how he performs.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I thought there's something about Zaha's game. It's just he's very agile, I suppose, and I like them sort of players that can take on players and take them on and beat them. You know, I've always been a bit old school in that respect. I like the ticker-tacker passing and everything like that, but I like exciting winners, and that's always something I've always been keen on in football. That gets me off the edge of my seat. As hard does that.
Players with that bit of an attitude, like your Ivan Toney's, like your Raheem Sterling's, like your maybe Jadon Sancho there that we've spoken about earlier on, like your Wilfred Zaha's. I think there's just a little bit about them, and I think when you look at the careers that they've had compared to say like a Jesse Lingard. Lingard's dropped off playing Korean football
Mm,
and he's not even performing that well there. They're still sort of playing for big clubs and their attitude has got them into places, I suppose. So it's always that argument. If it's channeled in the right way, it could lead him to opening doors, which has been proven in the difference of how, Lingard's career's gone and how theirs have gone.
100%. And that's where I think goes back to that point where I think Spurs have gone a bit wrong.
Mm. Now, one interesting transfer which you might not have seen, but I was very taken back to have seen this in my Twitter feed the other day. So I did screenshot it for this conversation. John Joe Shelby, mate,
Burnley. Yeah.
32 years of age, out in Turkey playing under Arda Turan.
Wow. Wow. I thought he was hard playing there, Shelby.
He's one of those players that I literally forgot even was still playing. And then when he came up in my timeline, I was like, he's still playing. What a signing to go out to Turkey and to be playing the type of football and just to still be having something from his career, mate.
Absolutely. You know, his day he could be a proper baller. Um, one thing that you could guarantee with him is always going to get him for his notebook. But yeah, it's a good move for John Joe Shelby, and again, that could reignite his career because it might give some Premiership clubs in the lower half of the table give them a statement thinking, all right, he's doing it out in Turkey. Can we bring him in January for a bit of experience?
And that's it, mate. He might, be one of those 6 month signings and his career drops off, or he might go out and have a bit of an impact there. But it's always one of those interesting moves where you're like, oh, right, this player's still playing. They've cropped up. They signed for this club. And they're sort of like the kind of Wikipedia entries that you read into. And then you start going on YouTube, whatever, and looking a bit more into their career. But, it was one that came up in my feed, and I was a little bit excited by just seeing that a little bit because it's one of those sort of sideways under the radar moves, which comes up. You're like, oh right, yeah, he still exists.
Exactly, and he's again that sort of player that you look on for free transfers on Football Manager and think that's who I'd like for my squad for a bit
And
of
I was just about
experience.
to say that, mate. When you're scrolling through a list of players, you're like, do you know what? He's like 38, but do you know what? I remember him playing when he was like early 20s and he's a decent player. He's not going to offer me much, but I still want to sign him because of the name that he has.
Yeah, exactly.
So definitely interesting, mate, and a lot of transfers again being dominated. But the transfer window's closed now. We're into the Premier League season, but that goal that I said for Liverpool was ruled out earlier on. But they're actually 2-0 up Liverpool despite a ruling out of the goal. So they could have been 3-0 up at halftime against United. Luis Diaz scoring both goals, 7 minutes apart from both of them. Mohamed Salah with 2 assists, and all United have got is 3 yellow cards in that first half. So not a positive half for them. A very challenging season for Ten Hag. A lot of pressure on. He's now readjusted the squad to the players he wants. He's then
Mm.
gone out and sold Scott McTominay, which has perhaps raised questions. But the argument is that he is tailoring the squad to how he wants it. There's been stability whereby he's still in charge. Brailsford has had that, stability by him coming in this year, for example. You got Dan Ashworth within that squad, and if he doesn't perform, I think he's under severe pressure at the end of this year, and whether they could replace him for a manager, and whoever that would be, for example. But I think unless he gets them up to scratch, then I think it could be a tough season for him, and he might be in the firing line at the end of the year.
Totally agree. I think there's a lot of pressure on Ten Hag now. I think it was covering for cracks really when he won the FA Cup last season. I mean, they did look. This is it though. I don't understand. They seem to be really well drilled against Manchester City, but when it comes to other teams, they seem to be. It all seems to go a bit peaked on. I mean, Manchester United. I find it's a very, very strange one with them because I obviously when we was younger and that Luca, we remember that with United, Old Trafford, you never wanted to go there because you was
Mhm.
always afraid of getting beat because you was going pretty much United on their day were ruthless. It's the other way around now. Away teams go there and think, oh, we can be ruthless.
And that's what it's become, mate. I think it's become that change culture essentially because, you don't go to United for you go there going, you know what, we can actually pinch a result here today. And when you look at the how the Premier League, has started so far, you've got Brighton who are sat third in the table at the moment, right? And when you look at their results and how they've started off, they beat Everton 3-0 on the opening game. They beat United 2-1. They went and beat Crawley in the EFL Cup, and then they drew with Arsenal. They've gone through in the next round of the cup. They've drawn with Arsenal. They've beaten United. They're off to a positive start. They're sat third in the table. They've scored 6, conceded 2, so they're very positive on that. They have a very young manager who could be up and coming, and he's definitely one to keep eyes on. But when you look at where the league table is right now, you've got City at the top. Liverpool are currently second after, at the moment, depending on what the result is after half time. Brighton, who are third. Arsenal, who are fourth. Newcastle, who are fifth. Then you've got Brentford, which again, I'm pleased to see them up there and having a positive start because we've spoke about them earlier on in the podcast. In this series and about perhaps the negative end towards their season last year. But Thomas Frank, you got Aston Villa who are sat seventh and are back in the Champions League for the first time I think since the 70s. So that'll be interesting as well. And you got Bournemouth who had a great result yesterday, who were eighth. You've got Nuno Espirito Santo who has started off okay with Nottingham Forest, and then you've got your Spurs and Chelsea sat 10th and 11th with United at 14th. Now you look at the competition of say the top 5 there, the teams just behind, and then you haven't even got Chelsea United in there. I think that just shows the levels where that has changed for United and whether Chelsea are going to start competing with those teams up there at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. I think United have declined, but I think it doesn't help either because it seems like their squad is so disjointed. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, De Ligt, great signing," which I'm not saying it isn't, because it is. Um, but it's just, again, a very disjointed team now, and I can't seem to find. There's a lot of different individuals. It don't seem a team. All Always what I associate with United. Again, it was Fergie days, good times we know, but you like your Vidic, your Ferdinand, your Carricks in midfield, Skulls, all these different lads. It cohesed as really well as and gelled really well as a team. They It don't seem to have that now. I mean, Casemiro, again, I'm not saying he's not a good player, but he's pretty much starting every game in that middle part for United, and he gets booked every game, and he's in his mid-30s now. You know, for United, it's not. It used to be quite exciting watching United. Now it don't seem to be as exciting. In fact, I find them quite boring under Ten Hag, dare I say it. Um, I don't feel that even around Old Trafford, because they're not seeing for results, you can see it's even disjointed in the atmosphere at Old Trafford now.
Mm.
Old Trafford used to be electric, it isn't anymore.
And I think that's a lot of what they're missing at the moment is that electric atmosphere that, all right, we're United, we're dominating, all right, we might definitely win the cup this year because of the way that we've been performing, or we got these world-class superstar players. Okay, they've made some signings in, like, for example, Xerxes, but they're not, your class players like your Berbatovs, like your Tevez, like your Robin Van Persie's. They're good players, and they need to step up, and they might turn into some real good players. But when you look at the squad as general, it seems so disjointed, as you've just said there, and it's a very strange squad, and it just doesn't seem to click or fit together. The puzzle pieces, it's just like there's some that fit, there's some extra bits over here, they're considering these bits over there, and it just hasn't come back together at the moment.
For Jigsaw's quite clunky,
Mm. Yeah, exactly,
and
mate.
I think it's got to a point. I don't know. It's like, as well, I think you've got a manager that, yes, he had that success at Ajax, but again, to me, he seems like he's got a bit of an ego as well.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. It's just, if I was a United fan, I'd be very disappointed, especially for the amount of money that you pay to probably have a season ticket there. I know someone that lives in Essex that goes up to United every home game, and he probably pays out, what, 60 odd quid for a ticket, X amount in fuel, X amount of food and drink, and your weekend up there. For what? You're not getting any entertainment for it.
Mm. Yes, and that's the difficult thing is when for example, I went to Newport County years ago, right, mate. And when I worked for the academy, I got free tickets to every home game, and it inspired me to go and watch them and get behind them a little bit more because I never really followed them, and I only used to go and see them like every few years, right. And I was never one to go, all right, they're in a cup run, I need to get tickets. And I was never like that. If they played, they played. Like it didn't bother me. I wasn't one of those fans, right. Or even like people who wanted to get tickets. But I went every week because I got a free ticket. I thought, I'll start watching this. But then we got into it where we were just like drawing every week. We were getting bad results, and it's just like dead atmosphere. I was like, why am I spending my Saturday bored out my head watching this team, even under a free ticket? To come away going, do you know what? I wish I actually went home and had my time back rather than having it, a late Saturday night, whatever, after a 3 p.m. kickoff. I was like, why am I watching this? And it's the same for United, especially if your mate is traveling up there. The amount of time and effort, and especially traveling up to Manchester, is not a nice journey. I've done it once or I've done it twice. Never again, mate. Very horrible journey.
Mm.
And, to watch United who aren't even winning or challenging, it's a bit of a tough one, especially with that money that he's spending.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is it. That's how I feel. Don't get me wrong. We do see some wonderful football in the Premiership, but I remember, obviously, because there's probably so many different rules now with VAR, with the delay of the flag and everything like that. At times, it's just not. It don't seem to. It seems still a bit clunky. I mean, I see players in the top flight, and yeah, I can be a bit critical saying this in the sense of, but you see players at the top flight that can't even control a ball that well,
Mm.
or they can't pass a ball. more than X amount of yards, and you think you're playing top flight football. People are paying X amount of money to, I suppose being in an era when you see it when, as you said, for names of Michael Essien, Michael Ballack at Chelsea, and for Robbie Keane's at Spurs, Defoe's at Spurs, and then Rooney at United with, again, Scholesy and everyone like that. Them times have evolved, but for me, I think top flight, even though I don't mind watching it on TV, I think if I'd gone to watch it actually live in flesh, knowing how much you paid out for a ticket, and with, when I say lack of entertainment, but frustration that comes with it, is it is it worth all that stress?
I think that's where it comes down to as modern day fans, mate, and the way the game is going. But one final question to finish off this week's podcast, right? Again, on Sean Dyche and Everton, do you think Everton will stay up or do you think they are going down? We're only 3 games in mind.
Last week I said that they're going to stay up. This week I'm going to say that they're still going to stay up. But how you throw a 2-0 lead away for the way they did yesterday is questionable.
I think it's very questionable, but mate, I'm glad that you've had consistency with that answer because I was like, if you're a turncoat after 1 week after that answer, I was like, you need to stand firm until at least 20 games in now before you change your mind and go, yeah, I think they're going to go down now. I can just feel it because they haven't pulled those results together. But we will see whether they stay up. Be interesting season for Sean Dyche, as we said in previous weeks. And he is one of those teams which are sort of monitoring and going from there, mate. But we've covered a lot of transfers today and different sort of perspectives, and mostly Chelsea dominated with a bit of Spurs talk at the start of it. But I think there's been a lot to wrap up from that transfer window. We've considered some of the results, and I think now the Premier League season is here. There's going to be a lot more focus on the games and what's up and coming, and the changes of managers and whether that happens, and the England squad and the games we got coming up. So there's definitely a wider discussion to be had over the next few weeks, and we've done a lot on transfers and covering the transfer window and extent. So if Sky Sports ever needs some stand-in transfer window guys to really take the conversation, I think we can definitely send off some of our podcasts for job interviews, mate, because we'd be with perfect cover, and we've had them nailed down to a T. But mate, another great one, and I hope that you have a restful Sunday. But I love doing this with you as always.
Yeah, you too, mate. And it's always a pleasure. And as you say, we cover so much and ever so much changes in a week. Anyone that listens, thank you for listening as well. And it's really good to do it with you, Luke, because it's nice to bond talking about something that we have a common ground in. All I just got to say is about Everton, don't get in a sticky toffee situation. And Sean Dyche, roll for Dyche and change it up. Done.
Mate, as I said, if you don't release a book on football poetry, I'm going to be very disappointed. But there's your poetry book, and then I want you to release a book on football jokes and what you could release. So you got 2 ideas for football books, which are one you write in when you're not recording podcasts, mate. All right.
Cheers, I appreciate that. I might look into that, yeah.
I definitely would, mate. Well, I appreciate it. And if you're out there, this is the man to watch because in the future he will be signing books for you at your local Waterstones or your local dealer. So, other than that, that's us for this week, and we look forward to giving you more content in the weeks to come.
Thank you, Luca. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a 3, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other 2, and that's absolutely fine.